I accidentally dated two brothers for 6 months before I realized, and the way I found out still makes my stomach flip. The first time I noticed something was off about Jonah was over a blueberry muffin at 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, which is the kind of detail you remember when your life later splits into before and after. He had always rolled his eyes at the muffins, called them sugar loaves, and picked the sunflower seed bagel instead. But that morning he breezed into Clover on Prospect with his hair still damp, kissed my forehead, and said, very seriously, "Can I get a blueberry muffin and a black coffee?" I laughed and said, "Who are you and what have you done with Jonah?" And he smiled in a way that made his left dimple deeper than I remembered and said, "A man can change, which, okay, fair, people change," but it planted a tiny flag in my brain that later became a red flare. I met him in December at the Kendall MIT and Bound platform when my Charlie card refused to tap and I choked the line. He had stepped in from behind me with a little theatrical bow and said, "My lady," touching his card to the reader and letting me pass, and when I turned to thank him he had these ridiculous, kind eyes that made you feel like you were standing in good lighting. He told me he worked in Cambridge at a little design firm in a brick building by the canal, and I told him I did QA for a biotech startup in Kendall that made fluorescent dye kits for labs and looked more like we work with succulent plants. And then he said, if we both live along the red line, and we both like to stand on the left side because of some moral failing, it might be fate, and I said, or we both hate being late. We traded numbers. He texted me 20 minutes later a picture of a pigeon strutting like an executive and wrote, "Your vibe?" And I countered with a picture of my cat, Ginger Snap, pressed against my laptop like a drunken intern and wrote, "Yours?" We clicked in the way that makes your phone warm from staying lit up. Voice notes about snowplows at 2 a.m. Tiny videos of him doing espresso cup cheers in random coffee shops. Me sending him the heartbeat of my deadlines and him sending me the soft lullaby of his neighborhood when he walked home past the Portuguese bakery on Cambridge Street. He made a playlist for me called Blue Signals because we had joked about the MBTA delay messages. And the first song was The Cars because he said Boston is musical memory, which, I know, sounds like a walking essay, but I liked it. We did exhibits at the ICA where he confessed he never understood installations with piles of dirt, and then he wrote me a note on a napkin that said, "If life is a pile of dirt, at least we can sit on it together," and I stuck it in my planner because I'm a transparent sap. He didn't like olives, he loved boxy hoodies. He had a tiny scar above his right eyebrow that I traced once in bed after a long day when he fell asleep on my stomach. He also sometimes vanished. It's not fair to say vanished. He had panic spirals. He told me that on our 6th date, in a booth at Trina's Starlight when I ordered a vegan grilled cheese and he ordered a hot dog and we split the fries, and his foot tapped so fast it made the ketchup bottle rock. He said, "Sometimes I rock myself off the planet," and I held his knuckles and told him I didn't need him to be a mountain. I just needed him to text me when he needed a rope. The first disappearing act was in February when we were supposed to go to his friend's housewarming. He texted an hour before, "I'm out. Brain says the floor is the ocean." I sent him a cringy gif of David Attenborough narrating a penguin who refuses to jump and then picked up 2 soups and sat cross-legged on his rug while he curled under a blanket and told me about failing driver's ed twice. I didn't mind showing up for him. That's what you do when you decide your life should include someone else's. The second time was in March when I met his older sister, Maya, at a farmer's market in Union. He had texted, "My sister is intimidating in a maternal way. She might ask you about your retirement account." And then when we actually got there he wasn't with me because he had left me a block away to park, and his sister hugged me like she'd been waiting for me to arrive in the family for years and said, "Ben said you're funny," and my brain did that thing where it buys time while spiraling. I said, "Jonah," and she cocked her head and said, "I know." I called him Ben to bug him, and then he materialized with a tote bag and a grin and said, quickly, "She thinks she's hilarious," and it landed like a ping that I shrugged off as sibling chaos, which is a real weather pattern that hits any outdoor market. But then there were the songs on the playlist changing order with no explanation, and he once used a different email address to share a Google Doc with me of potential Airbnbs for a weekend in the Berkshires, and the address said Ben L. something when his had previously said Jonah L. something, and when I asked he said, "Work thing, personal versus work accounts," and I believed him because the world is full of people with multiple inboxes, but then leaked through. The blueberry muffin at 7:42, the fact that on some days he held his pen with a weird index finger bend and on other days he wrote neat block letters, and me telling myself, people have moods, Sarah, chill. At Art Science in Cambridge, he told the bartender he was allergic to strawberries and then a week later at my friend's birthday, he took a bite of the strawberry shortcake and didn't go into anaphylaxis, so I made a joke, "I guess we're living on the edge," and he said, "Oh, that's Ben, he's allergic," with this split second of horizon panic on his face that vanished so quickly I thought I had projected it, and then we both laughed, and then I went home and lay on my carpet with Ginger Snap poking her paw into my ponytail and felt a little bit insane. Your body knows when the math is lying. The final straw was a cabin in New Hampshire. He had asked if I wanted to go to the lake for a long weekend in April to meet his mom, because if we're going to do real things, you should meet the person whose chili can fix literally any mood, and I said okay and bought a pair of boots that didn't make me look like a sad mushroom. We drove up in his beat-up Honda with a cracked dashboard and a tiny ancient Red Sox bobblehead nodding judgment, and he sang along to the Shins until his throat gave out and then made up harmonies I pretended to hate. We pulled into a gravel driveway with a green mailbox and a little wooden sign that said Larkin Lodge, and my stomach did the roller coaster clack. His mom, Miriam, came out with a dish towel over her shoulder and hugged me with her whole body like someone you've been catching up with in your imagination, and she said, "Ben," and he interrupted and said, "Ma," gently, with a warning, and she corrected like a mom does when she remembers the new social rules, "Jonah." I watched the correction land like a boat tapping a dock. Inside, there were picture frames and one of them had him with short hair and a kid next to him with the same face but a different jaw set, labeled in ballpoint in that exact maternal script, Ben and Jonah 2007. My mouth got dry. At dinner, Miriam asked me where I grew up and where my parents were, and I told her about my mom in Worcester and my dad in Florida with his new boat he named the Second Chance, and she nodded and asked if I liked her chili, and I said, "It's perfect," which it was, and then Jonah excused himself to take a work call and didn't come back for 20 minutes, and I went outside to find him sitting on the side steps with his head in his hands. I sat next to him and said, "Are you okay?" And he said, muffled, no, and I said, do you want to tell me why your mother calls you Ben and why your email is sometimes a different name and why sometimes you like blueberries and sometimes you don't? He looked up with a face like a window slammed by wind. He said, I have to tell you something. It's going to make you hate me. And then the screen door squeaked and another person walked out, and I held my breath because for a second I thought the world had finally done that thing where it lets you see the glitch in the Matrix. He was taller by an inch and his hair was a little shorter and his left eyebrow had no scar and his eyes were the same. He said, hi, with a voice that was a half step lower, and Miriam whispered, Jesus, Jonah, and the new person said, I'm Ben. The door banged shut behind Miriam the way a house tries to swallow a moment back inside. I am not dramatic, but my brain did this slow pan across every memory I had and then lit them up one by one like the lights coming on over Fenway. You know those puzzles where someone swaps a chair in a living room and you have 4 seconds to notice? It was that, but with the living room of my life. The blueberry muffin, the scar, the handwriting, the email address. Ben was a real person, not a detail I had cobbled together to make my unease into a poem. He said, it started as a stupid thing.